Hello and welcome back to your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. I was going through my playlist the other day to look at some of the topics that I covered and make sure I wasn't repeating anything, and I noticed something missing that I don't know how I skipped over this, but I want to rectify that wrong in this video and then the video that follows this one up. So we've done some grammar videos in the past. Most recently, we did some on prepositions. But for whatever reason, I must have just totally forgotten. I skipped over what are known as modals or modal auxiliaries, and they're pretty important. We use them all the time when we speak both in English and in Pennsylvania Dutch. So I saw that missing. I was like, we got to do it. Now there are multiple ones, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break the list in half. I'm going to do half of them in this video, and then the second half in the next video. So it's kind of like a mini series on modals. But let's get at it. So a modal auxiliary is a word that it's like a verb, but it can't stand on its own. Um, there always has to be another verb with it. Okay, and I have examples of them in English here. If we look at these two sentences, so what's in red is the modal, and what's in green is the other verb that goes with it. So if we look at the first sentence, I am allowed to go. Allowed is the modal. It can't stand on its own if you just say a sentence, I'm allowed, unless something's implied that you know from previously in the conversation. It can't stand on its own. You can't just walk into a conversation and say, yeah, I'm allowed. You need another verb associated with this. In this sentence, it's I'm allowed to go. Here's another example. He can buy the book. Can is the modal auxiliary. Buy is the verb that goes with it. And notice that in English, what is typical is that when we have the modal, the verb comes right after it. Okay? He can buy the book. I am allowed to go. So those are what modals are. Now, let's shift gears and go from English into Pennsylvania Dutch. Let's talk about the rules. And luckily, there are only two rules associated with modals in Pennsylvania Dutch, and these rules never get broken. Okay, so that's good. There's no exceptions to the rules. So here are the rules. Pretty simple. Number one, take the modal and conjugate it. So conjugate the modal in the sentence. Number two, and this is where it's different from English, and this is the most important one to try and get into your heads because it's weird for us English speakers, move the verb to the end of the sentence. So this is weird, and it's going to take getting used to. The conjugating part, that simply just takes a little bit of memorization. But what's going to be tough is, especially if you've never studied another foreign language, if you studied Standard German, this will be easy to you because it's the same rule as Standard German. But Pennsylvania Dutch follows this German rule, German grammar, German sentence structure, where the verb goes to the end. And yeah, we're going to end up making sentences that literally sound something like, if we would go back to he can buy the book, it'll end up being he can the book buy. And that's weird. Our brain wants us, if we're English speakers, to keep that to buy right after the modal. We want to say he can buy the book, but we're going to have to get into the frame of mind of saying he can the book buy. Eventually, you do it enough, it sticks, and then it'll sound weird if you don't do it that way. But at first, it can be really tricky, and we'll work on that throughout the rest of the video. So here are the first three modals that I want to deal with in this video, and we'll deal with three more in our next video. So the red across the top here are the three modals. Darf, which means to be allowed to. Kenne, which means can or to be able to. And mege, which means to like to. Now, the reason I said rule number one is conjugate the modal is because these guys don't always play by the normal conjugation rules. Remember from a previous video, we learned how to conjugate verbs, drop the E off the end, and then add the right ending. Well, these guys don't play by those rules, and a lot of them, their spelling changes too. So let's look at just darf. If you go down, I have your pronouns down the left, ich, du, er, sie, es, mir, dir, sie. And if you notice the first, that makes sense, darf, then it's darfst. But notice in the er, sie, and s, normally verbs will take a T there, but these modals do not. It just is darf. And then the plurals, darfe, darft, darfe. Okay, that one's not too weird. It doesn't really change spelling too much. But let's look at the next one, kenne. Notice that when we go to ich, the E changes to an A, and it becomes ich kann, and du kannst, and ACS kann. Then it changes back to an E for the plurals. Mir kenne, dir kennt, sie kenne. And what you'll find is when modals do change spelling, the spelling always changes in that ich, du, and acs forms. The last one, mega, to like. Here we go. This one changes spelling as well. The two E's change to two A's. Ich mag, du magst, acs mag, mir mege, dir megt, sie mege. You gotta memorize these guys because they aren't normal, because they don't follow the normal pattern. You just have to memorize them. And if you go them fast enough and get them stuck in your head, you'll be fine. Darf, 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 darfa, darf, darfa. Kann, kannst, kann, kenne, kennt, kenne. Mag, magst, mag, mega, megt, mega. Say them over and over and over again and they'll stick. So now let's utilize them and just look at a couple sentences. So let's take the first one, darfa, and let's take the sentence, you are allowed to go. The English is underneath. I kept the modals in red and the verbs in green. So we end up with, in Pennsylvania Dutch, du darfst gehen. Rule number 1, conjugate the modal. We did that. Rule number 2, put the verb to the end. It's at the end of the sentence. Du darfst gehen. You are allowed to go. Okay? Here's an example with kenne. We want to say, take our example from up above, I believe it was, he can the book by. That's right. It looks weird. And I did this just to show you, what it ends up being. Kan es Buch kaufen. Conjugate the modal, goes to kan, move the verb all the way to the end. Kaufen. Now here's where an English speaker, we want kaufen right after kan. But that isn't the way it works in Pennsylvania Dutch. It's got to be kan es Buch kaufen. Now I realize the English translation I have out of word order. I wanted to show you what it would look like if you literally translate that. But of course in English we say he can buy the book, of course. But in Pennsylvania Dutch, kan es Buch kaufen. That's going to take getting used to because it's weird. Here's another example with mega. I like to drink ginger ale. Pennsylvania Dutch, conjugate the modal, put the verb at the end. Ich mag ginger ale drinken. Ich mag ginger ale drinken. Another common mistake people do is when you look at the verb that goes at the end is always in what's known as the infinitive. That's the E ending. We never conjugate that verb at the end. You only ever conjugate one verb in a sentence or in a clause. In this case, we're doing sentences. So don't ever think that you need to conjugate the verb at the end as well. Nope, you just put the verb at the end as it would be in the infinitive. Ich mag ginger ale trinken. I like to drink ginger ale. Just one other thing I want to alert you to. What if you would ask a question? We'll think back to a previous video we did in what's called inverted word order. When we ask a question, we flip the verb and the subject. And here's an example. Can you drive a tractor? Again, in Pennsylvania Dutch, it's going to end up being, can you a tractor drive? It's weird, but that's what we'd say. And we look at it, conjugate the modal, kannst, put the verb at the end. Kannst du and tractor fahren? Kannst du and tractor fahren? Can you drive a tractor? Now, that was fast. I know modals are tricky at first. It takes practice because the biggest hurdle is overcoming the word order difference because our brains are wired as English speakers. We want to keep that modal and verb together, and you kind of have to tell your brain, no, we got to do it differently for these guys, okay? So memorize these 3 modals. Start playing around with them. You can build tons of new sentences now in tons of new situations. Think how many times in English you say, can I, or you can, ... or are you allowed to, I'm allowed to. I mean, we use those words a lot. Now you can use them in Pennsylvania Dutch. In the next video, I'll do the remaining modals that are left and show you what they are and how they conjugate. Luckily, the rules stay the same. It's just 3 new words, okay? All right, so next time, keep practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch. If you have an idea for a future video, please email me. My address is at the end of the video. Tell your friends to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and keep practicing your Pennsylvania Dutch. Spread the Dutch love, and Mox Good.
That's good.